Just ahead on American Black Journal, a groundbreaking project traces the progress of blacks in Michigan over the past 100 years. Plus, new funding to help revitalize Detroit neighborhoods, and a professional dancer goes in search of the American dream. Stay right there. American Black Journal starts now.
American Black Journal is funded by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first.
How does diversity bring energy to us all? At DTE Energy, we believe that it's the contributions of all that build great communities. As a company, we grow stronger by welcoming the unique perspectives of everyone. As community members, we support our state's broad culture and heritage. From working closely with women and minority-owned suppliers to embracing our local cultures, DTE Energy is powering diversity. The DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public Television.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. How much have blacks in Michigan progressed over the past 100 years? That's the question at the center of a grant-funded project highlighting African-American contributions to the state's history. The project is going to include videotaped interviews with descendants of people profiled in the 1915 Michigan Manual of Freedmen's Progress, which tracked African-American advancement 50 years after slavery was abolished. Here now to tell us more are two local historians working on the project, Dr. Michelle Johnson and John Green. Welcome, both of you, to American Black Journal.
Thank you.
Thank you. So one of the things I find absolutely fascinating about this is that it gets at the sort of mystery, I think, that exists for a lot of people in the state of Michigan. A lot of people think about African Americans here, they think about Detroit, they think about the Great Migration that brought African Americans in large numbers to Detroit. They don't know much about before that time and the presence of African Americans here dating back hundreds of years, if not more. This project, this work, this 1915 work in particular, shows how present African Americans were in Detroit 50 years, just 50 years after slavery.
Absolutely. And the thing that, you need to understand is that Governor Ferris was the person responsible for this. And the big thing that happened was this was a project to be included in the Lincoln Jubilee in 1915 in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And he drew this committee together headed by Oscar Baker out of Bay City. And they set about putting the book together so that it would be there. There are so many fascinating things about this book, and the original name of the book is The Michigan Manual of Freedmen's Progress. Mm-hmm. When I reissued it in 1968, I renamed it Negroes in Michigan History, keeping it within a historical context.
Right.
And the thing that you need to know is that basically I'm from Oklahoma. I'm not a Michigander.
Right.
I had Black history from grade 1 until I graduated from high school.
Right.
And when Lila Colby, who was a librarian in Lansing in the Rotunda, introduced me to this book, I just went bananas, because here was a book about black people that was written by black people. Uh-huh. Absolutely fantastic.
Right.
And I got hooked up with it, and now I'm in my 58th year of working with this book.
You haven't been able to let it go, right?
I couldn't let it go. And it is just so fantastic. But Dr. Johnson is the person that I am really indebted to, because she was able to get funding from the state, which I never could get, because they told me when I started with the book that there was no funding for this book.
Yeah.
So there are no federal money, city money, any money, but my own money in this project.
Which is always tough.
And it is such a fascinating book that I just could not turn it.
Yeah.
I just couldn't
turn away from it.
No.
Talk about some of the things that people would learn that they don't know. That are
oh my goodness, there's so
I know,
many.
There's so much.
And we call it tracking advancement with a question mark, because in fact we see very little advancement in a lot of ways. So we were just talking about it earlier that in 1910 there were over 400 black-owned farms that this book documents, and that the Michigan Manual documented, and we would be hard-pressed, I think, to find even probably 10% of that kind of land ownership and black farm land ownership here in the state of Michigan. So that's particularly interesting. The roles of black businesses, and not just farm owning, but property owning. There's so many beautiful pictures here of those homes throughout the state of Michigan, homes here in Detroit, and it really kind of situates, particularly right now when we as black people are losing so much space. You know, people don't imagine us in the landscape of Detroit in some cases and now, or Van Buren County or Cass County, where we had vast acreage and vast levels of property. Education, how much we were focused on education. The manual very firmly quantifies how folks were getting their degrees in law and their degrees in medicine. And so we see that we have very solid roots at Michigan State and their law program there, or Wayne State and their programs in medicine there. So we were very much a part of building those fundamental organizations and institutions that became part of, and are still part of, our kind of everyday landscape, but we don't see us here, and this book helps us situate us.
I'm really curious about the geography that you're talking about, where you had African Americans living in Van Buren or Cass County in larger numbers and owning property in those places back then. You don't have that now. What happened?
Well, I mean, certainly we know that farming and land ownership for everybody started to shift. 1915, as we start to have this, this new migration and a renewed migration of black people coming to Michigan, and people are starting to move more steadily into urban settings. This is also the time period where we don't want to have anything to do anymore with farming and mules. Or Neil Hurston said it, a lot of people are like, I don't want to do that anymore. And people start talking about people being country and Bama and backwards. And so we were starting culturally, not just in Michigan, but across the country. To be like, that's associated with oppression. But in the meantime, we lost an enormous amount of power and capital in that move. And so this documents that. And again, that's why we put the question mark at the end. Have we really, what kind of advancement have we really made?
Talk about the importance of this kind of knowledge and information now. That's always the hard thing with
one of the things that you have to understand is that this book chronicles what black people contributed to the state of Michigan.
Right.
You've got the Goodrich brothers out over in Saginaw doing the photography, and it's one of those things. You find a lot of pictures of the early lumbering, and they don't give any names to where the pictures came from. These belong to the Goodrich brothers.
Right.
And there are just so many things. Talking about Charlevoix County, Zachariah Morgan up there. This man owned 140 acres. He was lieutenant in the Haitian Army. And then the thing that is important is that this is big ski country.
Right.
At one time, now.
Right.
At one time, this was owned by
an African American.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
And we've
sort of forgotten those things, or maybe not forgotten, but purposely sort of brushed them away.
Yeah. Well, there was a city in Michigan called Wise that was owned by Feeney.
Yep.
He was a lumber guy. He owned a town.
Yeah. Right.
Absolutely fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
This is what captured me, Steve.
Is the we've only got about a minute left here, but is the goal of this to produce something that the state accepts as a more accurate record of?
Well, I mean, there are a number of products that are expected to come out of this. And one, I think the other thing that happens really important in this text is the position of women. We see how important women were, and the book really does a good job of that. And so what we plan to do is then incorporate into the museum at the Michigan Historical Museum some of these elements, some of these stories, to bring out these folks that we haven't been thinking about before. Also, we're doing mapping with this project, this grant-funded project, to identify and to repopulate Detroit Detroit in people's imagination. Where did we live? And then really kind of look at some of these larger stories of the racial violence. We have so much of that recognized here, racial discrimination. So to kind of look and say, these are some of the roots of some of the contemporary issues that we're dealing with today.
Right. We could be talking for
I
7
know we
hours
could.
about
I
this, but we're out of time.
One thing that
Thank
I'd
you
like to get
for-
in there is I would like to see this book updated.
Again.
Absolutely
yeah.
updated.
And
you know.
we are working on finding a publisher
Find a
to.
publisher
Yep.
to do it. All right. Thank you guys for being here. Good luck with the
Thank
work.
you so much, Stephen.